propaganda.
Early propaganda.
Right. They may be very old to us, and it may be just wonderful to dig up a bunch of, seals and have that incredible, euphoria of being able to decode this and learn about our history. But we must also step back and ask a very important question here. Who wrote that? In my book, in my work, we're talking about the fact that the great cultures of the Middle East, these ones that were in Mesopotamia, were based on the negative pattern. These were based on the Atlantean paradigm. One of the most contentious things of what I'm talking about is that Atlantis was not this paradisical place which was great, holy, full of holy people, and was wonderful. It's where some of the worst atrocities have taken place, because it was colonized by people who had no love for us. And later on, in historical times, these individuals, after the great cataclysms, set up shop again in
Okay, so you're saying that we were visited by extraterrestrials who weren't really good people.
No. As Carl Sagan has said, as Albert Einstein, as so many scholars out there know and recognize, and of course today we have many people in the UFO research community know this. We even have sightings. We have been visited on this planet probably innumerable times. But I'm only speaking in my book about one specific group of visitors whose agenda wasn't just to come here, do whatever they do, do their research, try not to be seen, as most visitors, don't want to be seen, and then they leave. That is perfectly okay.
What do they look like, Michael? Do they look like what we are now?
Yes, they're humanoid, only they probably be taller, and they live a lot longer.
Okay.
But to all intents and purposes, they would look...
They look about the same.
Absolutely humanoid, yeah. This is, I have a lot to say in the book about the appearances and where we go with the reptilian thing, and all of this is explained in the book.
All right. But still, though, what was their main purpose for coming here?
That's the key thing, and it's one of the things that fascinated me a lot. If you read the Popol Vuh and the ancient scriptures and then into the Celtic legends, you start to see the story. What basically happened was that they were forced, these individuals, and there weren't many of them, they were expelled from their own planetary system, which I happen to believe, you asked earlier about that, I happen to believe that it was Alpha Draconis, but, we could argue about that endlessly. And they ended up being pursued by their expellers. Now, we don't know if those people who were expelling this group of the Nephilim were as bad as they were, or, we're never going to know that. And it's kind of strange. It's probably not appropriate to use pantomime terms like good and evil, because we don't know if the people pursuing were as bad as they were. But the fact is that these individuals that were being pursued ended up in our solar system. And they set up a dummy base on the planet Tiamat, which used to exist between Jupiter and Mars. But they actually came and hid themselves on our planet. And the pursuers destroyed the planet Tiamat, causing the asteroid belt. And the first deluge, we have had two major catastrophes within the last 50,000 years that have had the most serious effects on our Earth. And the first one was the famous deluge, and that was precipitated by these beings. It was not a natural event. It was no stray comet just happening to hurtle through our solar system. Mm-hmm. That is not what the legends are saying. And if Babylon is saying that, I have questions, because I am very skeptical about reading the histories from the so-called victors who are doctoring their own history in order to make themselves look preeminent.
Okay, now, as they come to this planet, do they have some very nefarious reasons for coming here?
No, I mean, as they say, it's necessity is the mother of invention. I do not believe that these people have anything in common with us, in the sense that they would be without what we would call the violet ray. They were without any type of connection to this earth or any kind of morality as we would know it.
Okay.
However, they were extremely scientifically, technologically advanced, more than we can ever imagine.
They came in what numbers?
That is the hard question to answer. Different books say different things. Some say 1,000. In the Book of Enoch, they're talking about a group of 200. Some people are speaking of a council of 13. I would believe that they probably were up somewhere between 500 and 1,000 visitors.
And I assume they would come here in spacecraft, right?
They were all pursued here in their spacecrafts, and these spacecrafts were also able to go underneath the water, and they were here for a period of time in these spacecrafts, and our Earth ancestors saw them. Many of the ancient records that you read will talk about how scared and fascinated and bewildered the Earth people were when they saw the War of the Gods happening in the air.
Next hour, Michael, we'll get into some of the things they did scientifically and technologically. But what happened to Atlantis? How did it sink? Where did it go?
that comes after the first part you said, because of what these individuals started to do. Then came the destructions, which was also precipitated by them. I'd love to talk about that.
So had the destructions, had they not been doing whatever they were doing, it's very possible then that Atlantis might still be around.
Absolutely. In fact, they didn't think of it. They certainly did not want to destroy their own kingdoms and these continents. That had never crossed their mind, and it was not part of the plan. It was actually something that changed the Earth's history forever.
Something went wrong?
Yes.
All right, stay with us, Michael. Michael Tsarion, our guest. We'll be back with him in a moment as we get into his views. A different take, by the way, on Atlantis and what might have happened. Where did those inhabitants actually come from? We're going to find out that, too, because, well, as you just heard, there was another planet, he believes, between Mars and Jupiter that blew up or was blown up. Back in a moment. Michael Tsarion, our guest. Michael, before we get back into Atlantis, you had mentioned a little bit about British history about Atlantis. Did it have anything to do later on with the legends of King Arthur? I've always been curious about that.
Yes, it's interesting that we have the movie coming out. Again, the whole Arthurian legend is well-loved and well-browsed, a perennial study. As a matter of fact, this is what I meant when we first started talking about the importance of the Celtic connection, because the Arthurian tradition is actually based on earlier characters of the Gaelic people in Ireland. They have their Arthur, the Celtic people had Artur.
Artur, same. Yeah. It's got to be the same person.
Same, similar basis. You have the great sun knight, this knight of the sun, Lancelot. You have our sun god Lugh. You have Guinevere and Morgane le Fay in the Arthurian tradition.
Sure.
We have the Morrigan, which was one of the queens of Ireland, a warrioress who was married to one of the kings of the high Celtic people.
How about Merlin, the magician?
Yes, this is, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that expresses it perfectly. You see, everyone has heard of Merlin, and that's a fascinating character. He was also one of three very powerful druidic magician types. Two of them, one was Welsh, who was called Taliesin. The bard Taliesin was a person that either predated or was contemporary to the image of Merlin. But way before that, about 5, 6, 7, and I'm being conservative here, 6,000 or 7,000 years BC in Ireland, the prototype of the Merlin figure was a being called, it's hard to pronounce in Gaelic, it's, let me see if I can try it.
Boy, if you can't, nobody will.
Well, I'm trying to save you that. His name was Abergahain, which is actually pronounced Emergin. It looks, if you're reading it, Emergin, Amergin, but in Gaelic it's Abergahain. Abergahain is the head of our order. He is the druid that was of the high cults, because the thing to understand is that the Celts are, of course, a huge race. We're talking about an enormous demographic.
Sure.
So we have to be specific. Within the Celtic people was their elite, was their magical and royal elite. They were called the Gaelic people. And they are mostly to be found in Ireland, in the Isle of Man, and in certain parts of northern Scotland. And then within the Gaelic group themselves is yet another division, smaller still, of the real, arch-druids, the very purest and most powerful of all the magicians. And Abergahain was the druid and the bard of that group. So he is the prototype. Now, of this extremely important elite group in Celtic mythology, the king, the high king of Ireland, he had a sword. And that sword, he called it Retaliator. And Retaliator is the sword that is the prototype of the famous Excalibur.
Right.
So there's not a single detail, not even a person, not even a personage within the Arthurian tradition that cannot be tracked back to Ireland and to the original, even the Sir Gawain and the Green Giant, the Green Knight. That goes back to a character in Celtic mythology called the Dagda, the all-powerful, the all-father.
Well, are you saying, though, that the Celts were offshoots or offspring of the Atlanteans?
Both the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. One of the other cultures we haven't been speaking about so far was the Lemurian race, who was a contemporary of Atlantis, and they The Gaelic people are more of a Lemurian stock. But they definitely were hybridized on Atlantis. These beings that we're talking about are descendants of the original being that was the hybridized individual that I describe in the book as Homo Atlantis. We are Homo sapien, and sapiens is a word that just means the intelligent or wise one.
Right.
I just prefer a term in the book for argument's sake as Homo Atlantis, because the being that we are, this individual creature that we are today, that has both alien DNA and human DNA, was actually created on Atlantis by the visitors.
Yeah, so, Sylvia Brown, the psychic, says that I'm a reincarnated Atlantean. And Art Bell, too, she said. Many people will use that term generically. Many people will use it specifically. I can't speak for, because it's such a generic term. We're talking about a lot of people's interpretations here, which may be right and may be wrong. I am, again, just a purist who's going straight to an archival source of information for my information. Okay. Now, did I hear you correctly? Did they come from this planet that blew up between Jupiter and Mars, or did they come from a different one? No, they came from an entirely different solar system. They came from a solar system I believe was in Alpha Draconis, and I know, of course, there's been great debate about this. Did they come from the Pleiades? Did they come from Sirius? Where on earth did these people come from? To tell you the truth, in my work, that is a much lesser concern. I am more focused on, like Jack Barringer is, about what is the psychological impact on us of this visitation. I am interested, of course, in where they come from, but it's not my foremost interest. My most important interest, as I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm a philosopher. I am very much fascinated with the legacy of this. What kind of impact on the psyche? My book is entirely about the question of evil, the question of injustice, the question of this proclivity that every human being on this planet has within themselves. I don't care if you find it in the halls of government, which we do, unfortunately, but we have it within ourselves, this propensity for immorality, this injustice to, even if it's in a small, petty way, it exists. It's the endless conflict from the time we're born as to whether to be good or to be bad, if you want the most simplistic terms. The age-old question of evil. I personally do not believe that is just a happenstance of nature, the erstwhile movement of nature, flubbing it with its highest creation. Here we are in a universe that is perfect, in absolute balance, from the largest neutron star, right, to the smallest atom, is in perfect harmony. How can the force, nature, that brings that into existence, then make a big boo-boo with its so-called highest, creation, which is man? I do not believe that nature created this proclivity, which is driving the world to ecocide, which is putting us at each other's throats, which is causing all of the disasters throughout time. I do not believe that nature is responsible for that. I believe that something that has been tinkering and tampering around with nature's laws is responsible for it. I now know what that is. Do you believe, Michael, that there are remnants of Atlantis somewhere on the bottom of the sea? Yeah, there are, and as we talked earlier, definitely, we are finding these, and it's the old Indiana Jones situation. We might be shown some of this stuff, and the rest of it might just end up in that big warehouse buried, under the vaults. I would love to go browsing with you into the, underground libraries at the Vatican. I would love to, spend a day and look around under the Oxford University, libraries and what have you, and all the other private libraries. Only less than 1/10 of the books that have ever been written are available to you and I and to the rest of the listeners. We have a serious marginalization and sequestering of knowledge, not only by secret societies, but by institutions of learning, so-called, and we are not provided access to these wonderful, records. But my mentors, that is, Cummins Beaumont, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, they did. And they realized that they had to get this out to the public, but they couldn't do it in an official way because they would have been censored. So they chose the medium of fiction, what we now call fiction, the high fiction. And they created their great works in order to, and also did the medieval artists. We're talking about art here as well. Some of the finest artists from the medieval period and before and since have portrayed in their art, if you know what you're looking at, incredible information about the pre-Diluvian era and the whole of the conflict that I'm talking about. Now, can you paint a picture for us, Michael, what Atlantis looked like 30-some thousand years ago and what they were doing there, and also how long did they exist out there? 10 years, 1,000 years, how long? Well, I think it could have been as long as 30,000 years. of their existence there.
Once these people